Ah, Pokemon. The biggest multimedia franchise of all time, which doesn't always have the best of games. People really overhype this franchise, though. First, multimedia franchise is an important phrase. It means a franchise that covers multiple medias. Pokemon isn't the most successful video game franchise, people. Has to get that out of the way. Just had to get that out of the way. Still not an excuse for bugs in their games, but there is a distinction. Pokemon makes a lot of money on anime, cards, toys, and manga. Regardless, despite selling low, a lot of people praise one of the games a lot that came out on the Switch recently. It's called Legends Arceus. Arceus. Sorry, I like Arcues better. I pronounce a lot of Pokemon names wrong, just so we're clear, and if you watch my Let's Plays of this game, I'm sure you'll agree it's kind of dumb of me to do this, because I often know the correct pronunciation. Anyway, Pokemon is a place of many fans, both young and old. And I've personally been around for it since the beginning, Gen 1. But I've had a falling out with the series. Around Gen 3, I grew stale of the series, so I'm actually very unfamiliar with Gen 4, which is what this game is heavily inspired from. This isn't really a remake, however. It's a unique game. But this could have been an apology for the actual Gen 4 remakes. They weren't all that great. The game itself is fine for people like me who never played Gen 4 before, but as a remake, it doesn't really do enough different to justify, the actual remake as a whole. Could have added a bit more from Platinum, just saying. That all being said, I'm very familiar with Gen 4 Pokemon, and while I've never caught them all, I have most of them in Pokemon Go, if that's anything to go by. Speaking of Go, mind if I vent for a little bit? Too bad. Pokemon Go is insane, isn't it? A buggy mess, but the concept is so fun, I still play it, despite all the stupid little issues. The issues being that Pokemon are way harder to catch than need be oftentimes. The game will randomly crash, sometimes routes just don't work. Boy, that's a fun time. Still, collecting goofy little monsters is fun at the end of the day, and this game is, has that in spades. Legends Arceus is a bit different than most normal Pokemon, but it also has the collecting aspect in spades. I'll get into details later, but for now, I say let's start this bad boy up. Remember, I did a Let's Play of this game, so if you want more details of my thoughts and, various actions, you can get them there. I say, let's do this. We're taking on the almighty Sinnoh, but it seems like people are talking about Palkia or Dialga and Arceus. Yeah, alright. Let's do it. Let's take on Arceus! So, the story begins and your character is more or less time displaced. Basically, your character is from the future, flung into the distant past by Arceus. You meet a professor named Laventon. I never noticed the N before now. Jeez Louise, I said Laventon a ton in the Let's Play. Anyway, the professor lost some Pokemon that he imported from other lands. He asks you to help him and go catch them, which you do rather easily. See, the people of Hisui have a natural fear of Pokemon. They are dangerous, magical creatures, and Pokeballs are a very new invention. Your character is more used to these concepts and lacks the initial fear of Pokemon, so your character is a natural at catching them. That is actually a good excuse to have your character basically getting things done while nobody else really is. Interesting. Anyway, you're put into the team of explorers in an effort to learn all they can about Pokemon, filling out the Pokedex. Eventually, though, it is shown that the people of Jubilife Village aren't the only ones in Hisui. There are two clans, a Diamond Clan and a Pearl Clan. The Diamond Clan believes in a religion in which some almighty Sinnoh is a deity of time, and the Pearl Clan believes the exact same thing, but that Sinnoh is a deity of space. Yeah, this game isn't trying to hide anything with this, by the way. If you're any familiar with anything Pokemon related, Gen 4 wise, you know exactly where the story is going. Obviously, one of these clans is worshipping Dialga and the other Palkia. So, Sinnoh is the original Gen 4 region, which is where you're at now. But Sinnoh is obviously called Hisui back in the day, and the deities they're referring to, will be well known as Arceus later in the game. More or less, the almighty Sinnoh is actually Arceus. Sinnoh is going to be the region eventually instead of, just the name of the deity. Anyway, these two clans aren't the friendliest and want to war over differing religions. That's interesting. But they all have issues. Some of their holy Pokemon are going nuts. Yeah, each major area has a giant Pokemon that either the Diamond and Pearl clan are watching over, and they probably got hit by lightning and are kind of going into a feral form. Your job ends up exploring each major area, talking with the Guardians and getting a ride Pokemon, then going after the sacred Pokemon that went feral. These are the boss fights of the game, and you use bombs of their favorite food to calm them down. It's pretty different than most Pokemon games, actually. Eventually, the village blames you for the issues out of nowhere. They do know you came from the sky, after all, I guess, and they kick you out of the village when the sky goes completely red. From here, you have to find a base of operations and figure out what exactly is happening. To do so, you need to visit the Lake Guardian Pokemon. They're legendary Pokemon that represent emotions. Anyway, you talk to them and prove yourself to get this chain. Using the chain, you can fight your way to the rift up on top of the mountain, and after defeating your former boss, you have a chance to fix things. The chain breaks, but it pulls out either Dialga or Palkia from the rift. You fight and catch them, and they aid you in fighting the next deity Pokemon, as they kind of went feral too. After catching the other deity, you end up with both Palkia and Dialga. You basically beat the game, sort of. There's some extra plot afterwards, but the credits roll, so I call it beat here. Overall, the story is simple and could be more fleshed out. Seriously, what is the point of expanding Pokemon this far into the past and then really doing nothing with it? It is, however, a neat idea to have everyone think that both Palkia and Dialga are more or less Arceus, and even fight over it, but they don't really push this concept either. The clans are very friendly with each other by the end of the story, and while each major area does have, smaller stories going on, none of them are really used to flesh out the lore. They are more about the Diamond and Pearl clan members finding peace and getting along instead of hating each other, and that's about it. It's great character writing, though, and I do enjoy these characters, so I can't complain too much, but the overall... Wait a minute, isn't this particular guy from, Pokemon Black and White or something? Huh. Anyway, the overall plot just feels lacking once you hit the credits. The payoff was just not there in the end. However, like I said, the character writing isn't terrible, with Adamant and Irida being pretty decent, and the clan are pretty well written overall. I will say it is heavily hinted that the people in the Galaxy team are mostly from Galar, and were probably attacked by Eternatus, which is kind of fun. That would also explain why they freaked out when the sky went red, because, that's Eternatus' signature color, and that's probably why they kicked you out, because, Eternatus haunts their nightmares. The character writing and world building is pretty decent. I just wish the overall story did something more with the Pokemon lore. And they really didn't. Let me rephrase, everything is left up to interpretation. Which is why, again, I'm coming up with theories about Eternatus and all that. Let's talk about the presentation and charm of this game. It is Pokemon! I really don't need to say more, but I guess I'll elaborate. First thing, this game is heavily inspired by Diamond and Pearl, if that wasn't obvious. I love Gen 4 Pokemon, despite never really playing those games. What's more, I also enjoy the designs of the new Pokemon that Legend Arceus introduces. The Hisuian forms of the starters are absolutely amazing. I love Decidueye. Honestly, it's one of my favorite starters, and while I think his Hisuian form is a downgrade, personally, compared to the original, it's still really awesome. Typhlosion is a bit chiller and less badger angry, but I love the Spirit Flames. Those are really cool. Samurott got the best upgrade, however, being far more interesting to me as a dark type. Arcanine got an upgrade and looks even better. Electrode works well as a Pokeball design made of wood. Quillfish looks way better, but his new evolution's kind of goofy. Sneasel got the way better form and evolution, so yeah, Sneasel is eating really good here. Lilligant is a bit better here. Zoroark has been massively improved as a ghost type. I mean, I love Zoroark's old form, don't get me wrong, but this is insanely good. Oh my gosh. Goodra is more snail-like, which is interesting, and I learned to love it. Braviary is better as well as a psychic bird. Avalugg is the last one and is kind of boring, though his boss fight looked kind of cool. And the Pokemon going feral, glowing like that bright yellow, looks really badass. I kind of wish you could catch that form. Alpha Pokemon with glowing red eyes are also terrifying when you first run into them. I spent a long time afraid of the Alpha Rapidash in the first major area. Great. Alpha Pokemon are just bigger versions of regular Pokemon. But when wild, their eyes glow red and the music gets all sort of dark and scary. Seriously, people are excited about Megas coming back in the next Legends game, but here I am worried that I'm going to find an Alpha Mega Gyarados at a very low level and get destroyed. Speaking of the music is pretty decent, and you get different tunes depending on location and time of day. And the humans are all designed to look like, ancestors from Pokemon characters you might know and love. Basically, most of the notable characters look like they could be distantly related to various trainers from the series, while still looking unique enough to stand out. Overall, this game is charming as hell, and honestly, I could probably recommend the game based on that alone. But there are obviously some other things that I'd like to discuss first. Like the gameplay. This game doesn't play like any other Pokemon game, but from what I can tell, it also doesn't play so differently that it loses the whole base Pokemon concept. Basically, there are two types of styles here. One has you stalking and hunting Pokemon, while the other side has you battling Pokemon. The stalking side is stealth-based. You crouch down and walk near Pokemon. If the Pokemon sees you, it'll either run or attack. If it attacks, you can dodge roll to avoid attacks, which can be an issue if you get too many attacks at once. Some of these attacks follow you too. Great. Dodging is much more difficult than it really should be against some of these attacks, leaving me to get destroyed by Pokemon. You lose items when this happens, which really sucks. That being said, using stealth is really fun. It may not always be practical, but it's still really fun, and you can throw items to stun Pokemon as well as, bait. When the Pokemon is stunned or distracted long enough, it doesn't see you, you can throw Pokeballs at Pokemon and catch them. Behind them works the best. Or, if you want, you can toss your own Pokemon out and battle them instead. This allows you to weaken and catch Pokemon a little more traditionally. In battle, your character can move around and even be knocked down by Pokemon in attacks. Neato. Pokemon move differently as well. There's a strong style and agile style which comes into play here. Strong style boosts power of a move, but it takes more PP away and makes the Pokemon slower. Agile style sacrifices some power for some more speed, and it still takes more PP away. Basically, a Pokemon can attack multiple times over another Pokemon based on speed alone. You can absolutely get your Pokemon destroyed if your opponent is faster, especially if you're battling another trainer or end up facing multiple Pokemon. If you knocked out an opposing Pokemon, the switch in will probably have a chance to avenge their fallen ally before you can switch to a better Pokemon matchup. Either way, I think the change is actually great. This is the natural evolution a lot of RPGs made back in the day, and making things slightly more complicated really works for Pokemon. It's basically like comparing Final Fantasy to Final Fantasy VI, It's more challenging, there's more intricacy, but it's still turn-based at the end of the day. It's still a simple game, by the way, Legends Arceus here, with simple rules, but it's more challenging than the other games in the series. That's all I'm saying. Simple isn't always bad, though. The game is fun, and while simple pickup to play, doesn't necessarily mean, it's going to be easy to master. Mastering the game is very fun and exciting, and that's what's important when it comes to the gameplay. Now, when it comes to level design, this game is actually open world, to a certain extent. There are larger areas separated by a few loading screens. Basically, you have one large open playground, and these playgrounds are actually really big. In each of these playgrounds, you also have a few goals. One is to catch Pokemon, which you get paid for, which is actually really cool. The second is to deal with a particular Guardian. Each area has a few Guardian Pokemon that you'll have to deal with, one of which will become a ride Pokemon, and there's about one of these per area. Weirdeer is just a faster mode of transportation that can get up certain slopes better than your character can. Sneasler can climb sheer walls, but is way slower than Weirdeer. Basculegion is more or less Weirdeer, but in water. Braviary is a glider and the best way to travel most of the time. And then there's the literal bear Ursaluna. Ursaluna helps you find items, sometimes rare, and sometimes can evolve a Pokemon, and sometimes material for crafting. Yes, you can craft in this game. You mostly build your own Pokeballs, potions, revives, and other items, sometimes to throw at Pokemon, sometimes to stun them, and make them easier to catch. Anyway, you get the newest ride Pokemon, and then you go after the large Guardian Pokemon, which is going crazy and glowing yellow. These are very aggressive. You basically pelt them with a throwing item until they relax, meanwhile dodging their attacks and battling them every so often for a chance to hit them with even more of this particular item. This is unique for Pokemon, battling them in a unique way. If you stun them, you can still bring out your Pokemon for a bigger chance to do damage. The opponents are Kleavor, Avalugg, Electrode, Arcanine, and Lilligant, all of whom fight very differently, and then you end the fight with either Dialga or Palkia. The final boss takes what you learn and ramps it up a bit, which works really well. The increasing difficulty fits perfectly with this game. Of course, though, just because you defeated and caught Dialga and Palkia and calmed the time rifts down doesn't mean you're done with the story. Yeah, despite the game acting like this is done, afterwards you end up with a lot more tasks. Legendary Pokemon catching. You open up several quest lines to catch them all. Heatran, Cresselia, Regigigas, even going back to catch the late Guardians, all of whom helped you earlier. This gets you more plates. See, you've been collecting plates, elemental in nature, which are oftentimes given to you by the Guardian Pokemon you've been defeating in battle. Well, you get them for battling and defeating legendary Pokemon as well. Eventually, after defeating and catching them all, you end up with Volo at the mountain summit. Volo is this nomadic traveler and part of a merchant guild. He, however, likes researching ruins and myths, though, basically shrugging off work. However, when you're, done collecting plates and you only have one left, the spooky plate, you find out that this entire mess is Volo's fault. He managed to gather Giratina, and a cast-out Pokemon that was banished by Arceus, the creator of the world, and use Giratina to more or less cause all of these problems. Now, Volo wants to battle you. After defeating his 6 Pokemon and Giratina twice, with no breaks, you manage to get his plate. To verify, you don't battle Volo twice, you battle Giratina twice. So it's basically like an 8 Pokemon smackdown dragout. You can then catch Giratina to study. You can then talk to Kogita, a woman of myth herself, and catch Tornadus, Landorus, and Thundurus with no real backstory. Actually, outside of Giratina, Dialga, and Palkia, and Arceus, none of these Pokemon really get backstories for any of this crap, which is kind of a shame. Anyway, you catch them, Thundurus being the biggest pain in the ass Pokemon has ever been of all time. Then you can go catch the brand new legendary Pokemon Enamorus. She's also a pain in the ass. You get hit a lot by things that you can't see in the Thundurus because Basculegion is so big that it's almost impossible to dodge all these attacks, but you can't stealth him, unfortunately, unlike the other two, which is why Thundurus is just... Oh, and plus you have to wait for a rare Thunderstorm, which I could barely ever get to spawn. And Enamorus also needs a ride Pokemon to deal with, but she's slightly less of a pain in the ass than, Thundurus. After that, you catch all the unknown hidden everywhere and gather the purple fire spirits to catch Spiritomb. Gathering all the Pokemon. Yep. This is how you unlock the secret final battle with Arceus. It's not all the Pokemon, though. Like, realistically, you don't have to catch every single Pokemon and complete the entire Pokedex. Because, yeah, you got some of the Mythicals, but you can still catch the Mythicals in this game. You just need help from the Gen 4 remakes and maybe Sword and Shield. Manaphy and Fion can be caught with a guide or using clues in the remake. If you have the remakes on the Switch, though, as well as Sword and Shield, you can get Darkrai and Shaman. These are mythical Pokemon. They're normally more rare than legendaries. Too bad they're all shiny locked. However, here's another thing, too. If you complete level 10 on your research tasks, they're basically side tasks with every single Pokemon. Yeah, It's a hell of a task. You can get a Shiny Charm. The Shiny Charm increases the odds of finding rare color variant Pokemon known as Shinies. They shing, sparkle, sparkle when you get near them, and when you actually look at them, you can see, kind of like some sparkles coming out of them as well. All in all, there's plenty of content here to keep you busy, even if catching some of these are an absolute pain in the ass. Overall, pretty fun, though getting level 10 research, yeah, it's just busy work. Holy crap. What a pain.